Alright, we'll now discuss further about multimedia and graphics software. Of course, when you say multimedia, that means lots of media. Multimedia, right? Here we talk about things that we can deal with regards to the computer. For example, the first thing that we can talk about are pictures. We also have sound and animation and video, right? So these are, of course, different things. These are motion picture, this is picture, and this is sound. Now, the concepts with regards to these three different elements of multimedia and graphics. The first one is pictures. With regards to pictures, we'll first discuss about bitmap, right, and then vector graphics. These are two different types of graphics. Bitmap, as the name would suggest, consists of two syllables. The first one being bit, second one being map, bitmap. So what are bits? If you still remember from when we learned pixels, when we learned about monitors and printers, you learn about pixels, you learn about dot pitch, etc. Right? So pixels are picture elements, right? And these are basically the dots that actually create a picture, right? In the same manner, right, here is a picture created using dots, small dots, and all of these dots are represented by bits, so it's called a bitmap, right? Let's say you want to create a picture of some kind of a mountain like that, right? So basically, it is created using all of this bits, all of these little dots, right? So bitmap is a map of bits. And because they are created using all of these small dots, you see these small dots, right? One by one, you can see that each of the dots can be controlled and the intensity can be changed in such a way that they look really realistic, right? Let's say, for example, if you want to create a picture of yourself, then you know that yourself have lots of different elements. For example, you might be wearing a yellow t-shirt, you have black hair, some of you have blonde hair, right? You might have face which is yellow or brown, whatever color you have, right? And maybe you have pimples and maybe you have facial hair, so those are different kinds of colors. Your lips are slightly reddish or maroonish, or you have lots of different elements of color. And even if you say yellow or brown or whatever, which is your skin, you have different kinds, different tones of brown and yellow and etc. Right? And you also have like shadowing and depth. For example, your nose is at the front and your cheek or chin is somewhere else, which is on a different plane from your nose, or your neck is different from your nose. You know, it's like a different plane, there's a certain distance. So all of these can be represented by color. By having a darker color, for example, you give the perception of depth, for example, right? So by manipulating all of these little dots, you can actually come up with images which look realistic looking, right? I'll just write vector slightly down here so we can differentiate better, right? So vector will be written here, right? It looks realistic, but because we need to control all the little dots one by one, what happens that these images tend to be large in size. This is of course relative to your other files. Let's say, for example, if you take a picture with your 14 megapixels camera, which is the one I'm using now, right? You take a picture, compare the size of that picture to the size of your Microsoft Word file. For example, your Microsoft Word file might be 20 kilobytes, right? Whereas your picture might be 3 megabytes or 5 megabytes, right? So which is much larger, right? So that is with regards to bitmap, right? So it looks realistic, that is the advantage, but it is large in size. And what is it? Bitmap is realistic looking images made up of map of bits. So this is different from vector or vector images. What are vector images? Now, instead of coming up of an image made up of bits, little dots, vector came up with images made up of shapes, definite shapes. Now, if you still remember from high school maths, you have things like rhombus and trapezium and triangle and circle and everything. And all of these shapes have math equations associated with them, right? For example, this times this square, you came up with the distance, or you came up with the area of a certain shape, right? And if you add this and that and multiply it with something else, you get this diameter of that particular shape, for example, right? So you have math equations associated with shapes. Now, if you come up with more complicated equations, technically speaking, you can also come up with more complicated shapes, right? So vector are really shapes created using math equations. So when you create shapes like that, let's say you have a picture of someone, right? And it is a definite shape like that. Wow, like that shape, and then you put his ear, and then his eyes, and then his nose, and then his mouth, for example, right? Now, if we get rid of all of these eyes and everything, we have that shape in the center, which is supposed to be the shape of the face. Now, this shape here is really sharp. This shape here is really sharp. It comes up with a rather complicated math equations. Because it's really sharp, you can stretch it. Meaning, if say the shape is, let's say it is 3 inches times 5 inches. If I stretch it, meaning if I want to print it up to 50 times 30 inches, it will still be sharp because it's a shape compared to this. Right? This is also, although it looks realistic, you stretch it, it becomes blurry and pixelated. Pixelated when blown out. Blown out or blown out. Meaning when you stretch it, let's say you take a very small picture using your smartphone and you want to print a banner, for example, then maybe it won't be too sharp, right? Unless you can change it into vector, right? Now, these shapes are really sharp, very sharp, that it might look cartoonish. Cartoonish. Meaning, when this the advantage of the bitmap is it looks realistic. The disadvantage of vector is it looks cartoonish. I mean, imagine if people's faces were like definite shapes, then you won't have texture. You won't have, like, for example, this side is slightly browner than this side, for example. You won't have texture. You won't have the little pimples and the little texture of certain spaces, certain parts of your face is darker than the other, or lighter or fairer than the other. You don't have those elements. You just have one solid color, right? So it will look cartoonish. It won't look realistic, right? But the advantage is, of course, size is small, right? And because you can create the shapes and you can name them. For example, you can create this shape, you can name it the triangle. You can create this shape, you can name it the rectangle or square, right? Because you can create it and then name it, right? The elements are searchable. Searchable shapes, right? The shapes, individual shapes are actually searchable. Meaning you can index it, you can search it, and etc. Right? So why not, if you want realistic images, you go with bitmap. Otherwise, you go with vector. Right? This is when you deal with designs and etc. Right? Next is sound. Right? So I'll get rid of all of these things. Hopefully, you write that in your notes. Pictures is done. We need some space with regards to sound and then video. Okay, sound. For sound, we have this concept called ripping. Rip. Basically, the sound that you have inside music CDs are analog sounds. They are very nice sounds. The problem being they are too big. Meaning, if you imagine you buy a CD, you have maybe a maximum of, I don't know, 20 songs inside the CD. But if you rip it, meaning you take the analog CD, right? You rip it, meaning you turn analog into digital. Analog sound, music, whichever format inside your CD. You might turn it into, let's say, for example, MP3, for example. Now you turn it very small, meaning the same amount of space, let's say 600 megabytes, you can fill in 20 songs, analog songs, you can fill 20 songs, so roughly one song is 30 megabytes, right? With 30 megabytes, maybe you can store all of your original songs, for example, right? So which means that 1.5 megabyte per song when it is in MP3 format, right? So ripping is turning analog sound into digital format, for example, turning it into MP3 format, and you do it because you want a smaller size of files, right? So you can store more inside your computer. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I erased the pictures as well, right? So we have the three types, which is pictures, sound, and now we can talk about animation and video. Okay, needless to say, when you work with video, basically you will work with a kind of software, right? Where basically you can put your files that you work on, right? Somewhere, let's say you put it here, right? The files that you work on, all your video files or your picture files and everything. This is the window that runs it, so you can see the result of you processing all of these things, editing all of these things. And usually you will have several lines, where for example one line is for video, one line is for pictures, one line is for effect, one line is for sound, right? So this is what we call like some kind of a timeline. So by manipulating the line, let's say you want to put your video here, and you want to put your sound here, right? So your video will run until one point, and then you have your sound, like a music running in the background, right? Or after which you might want to put like some pictures. So this is your timeline, and you can put several elements, right? Meaning maybe after this, at this particular point, you want to put text, for example, some kind of subtitle for your video, right? So you can put all of these things. Basically, all of your video and animation software works something like this. Meaning you just put something, video especially, right? Or multimedia authoring. Multimedia authoring. Video editing or multimedia authoring, it works like this. Sorry, animation does not really work like that. It's slightly different, right? Video multimedia authoring, basically you can just put your files, the materials that you want to work on. There will be a window where you can see the result of you doing whatever to your work in progress, and then timelines where you can put different elements so that you can edit your video. See, you can put subtitles and sound and pictures and video and effects. Sometimes in between videos you want, it morphs into the next scene or whatever, right? Next we have animation. Animation is where you can put, like for example, you can put an element like a cartoon or something, and then you can decide how to animate it, right? It moves like this or like that, right? So needless to say, we have several software for sound. Yeah, you can look through inside your slides. We also have several software for video, multimedia authoring, and animation, right? We also have several software for pictures. For example, Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, 3D rendering software, etc. Now, with regards to multimedia and graphics, when or if we create, usually it's art, multimedia graphics, when or if we create art, usually we want people to be able to enjoy it, right? And when or if you want to do that, you have to have a way of sharing it. And when or if you want to share, usually you put it on the website, right, or on the World Wide Web, YouTube or something, right? And there comes a question of whether the quality is good enough. That's one thing. And if we can control that, we also have to look at the size. Meaning to say that we have to play around with these two things so that we have a decent size, meaning a small enough size with a decent quality so that people will be able to enjoy it, right? So to be able to keep track of these things so that your multimedia graphics files can be shared and people can enjoy it, we make use of this thing called codecs. Right? What are codecs? You can refer to your slides. It actually says codecs are actually compression, some kind of a compression utility for your multimedia graphics files, right? So that you can, in a way, optimize quality or have a decent quality, but minimize the size so that it is easily shareable, right? Especially in the World Wide Web. Meaning you don't want your YouTube file of 10 minutes to be 20 gigs, for example. Then it will be too large and people will have to wait so long to watch it, although the quality is really good, right? So you have to find some kind of a compromise, and to be able to do that, we make use of codecs. Okay. With regards to codecs, we can come up with two different kinds of compression. One is lossy, the other is lossless. Right? Lossy is where you get rid of things. Let's say, for example, if you take a picture, right, the original file size might be 15 megabytes. This is because it takes into consideration lots of different things, which might not be necessary for people to just enjoy and have a look at the picture, right? So some people came out with this compression method called lossy. Lossy. Lossy is where you get rid of things which are deemed unnecessary, right? Lossless, on the other hand, is where you just rearrange your information or data so that you minimize the amount of space taken. It's like, for example, you're going to camp, right? And the bus is already here, or your mom is already screaming at you to get to college, to get on the bus for the camp, right? So in this panic state, you just throw everything inside your bag. Now, if and when you throw everything inside your bag, before you know it, your bag will be almost full, right? Oh, I'm full. Oh, my underwear not packed yet, for example, right? So to be able to pack your underwear, there are two methods that you can use. One is the lossy compression, meaning you look through your bag, whatever is not important, you just throw it out, right? Meaning you get rid of things, right? Compression, where you get rid of unnecessary information, unnecessary data, right? Unnecessary or unimportant, maybe I should use unimportant, because unnecessary here can be hard to read, right? Unimportant data, right? Here it just rearranges, right? So what is the meaning of rearrange? For example, your bag, instead of throwing out things so that you can put your underwear in, you can actually, instead of just throwing inside your bag, you can fold them nicely. Meaning when you rearrange them and fold them nicely, you might be able to fit in more things. For example, your underwear, right? So in the case of sentences, for example, we can say, I walk into this room and there's two pillows, one pillow, there's another pillow, there's another pillow, there's another pillow. By saying things like that, basically I have the same amount of information as saying I come into this room and there are four pillows, for example, right? The same amount of information, no information is thrown out, right? I just rearrange my sentences. Now I have less sentences to work with, meaning my size is smaller and I compress, and I don't throw out anything, right? Meaning all the information is there, right? So that is with regards to multimedia and graphics software, and it's quite long, which